You don't look like you belong in first class. Captain Lauren Mitchell spat without blinking, her words slicing through the hush of the cabin like a blade. Or is this some kind of charity seating for underprivileged passengers? Amara Brooks stood frozen, one hand still gripping the back of seat 2A, her knuckles white, her face unreadable, but her eyes flared with a quiet fire. Before we go any deeper into this story, I want to know something. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, because right now, you're about to step into the cabin of a $70 million jet where injustice didn't just get called out, it got fired. It was 7 a.m., sharp at a private terminal in Miami. The Gulfstream G700 shimmered on the tarmac, its jet engines quiet, its windows tinted like secrets. Inside, Amara Brooks, 45, billionaire CEO of Horizon Ventures, boarded alone, no assistant, no press, no clue given. She wore black leggings, an oversized gray hoodie, and sneakers, not the uniform of a billionaire. But that was the point. She wasn't here to be seen. She was here to test her staff. Amara owned Horizon Sky Aviation, the luxury charter firm flying this jet, and for the next 15 minutes before takeoff, she would face humiliation that would ignite a firestorm. As Amara walked down the aisle, placing her laptop bag near seat 1B, Lauren, the captain, early 40s, sharp blonde bob, resentment hidden poorly beneath professionalism, intercepted her. "Excuse me," Lauren said curtly, blocking her with a clipboard. "First class only. This area is not open to all passengers." Amara paused. "I'm seat 1A. Lauren scanned her clothes like she was evaluating damage. "You'll need to show proof of elite status, or we'll have to reassign you." Behind her, a man in a Navy suit with a Wall Street jawline, Richard Holt, hedge fund manager, shoved Amara's laptop bag off the seat with the back of his hand. "Don't clutter my space," he barked. "This isn't Coach." Amara, her pulse steady but rising, retrieved her bag without a word. She reached into her hoodie pocket and offered a paper ticket, an alias boarding pass registered under Horizon Sky's internal system. Lauren scanned it, then smirked. "This name doesn't show up on our elite manifest," Amara replied evenly. "Try checking with corporate," Lauren snapped. "You're not cleared. You're stalling boarding." Passengers were settling into plush ebony leather seats, sipping espresso, adjusting silk ties. One of them, a young black man with dreadlocks and a Patagonia vest, Jaden Cole, a tech founder, glanced up, pulled out his phone, and hit record. "This ain't right," he muttered. A few rows back, Zoe Ellis, a 25-year-old black graphic designer, flinched, eyes lowered, but before Jaden could capture more than a few seconds, Lila Grant, a poised woman with curls and a calm voice, reached across the aisle and pressed his phone down. "Don't film. Talk," she said firmly. "We hold people accountable with our words, not our footage." The tension in the cabin thickened. Evan Carter, 27, a digital strategist who had been quietly observing, clenched his jaw and whispered to Amara, "They're doing this to you because of how you look." Amara gave him a glance that said everything. "I know." What most of the cabin didn't know was that 21 years ago, at age 24, Amara had walked into a Miami-based aviation firm with 3 contract proposals. All 3 were dismissed. Before a single page was read, one manager told her she was too polished to be real. That moment didn't break her. It built her. By 40, she was the owner of Horizon Sky Aviation, valued at $6 billion, but now, in her own jet, she was being erased. Again. Lauren's voice rose, cutting through the ambient hum. "This non-elite is delaying our flight," Richard chimed in, waving a fake metal ID. "Priority seating," he said smugly, as if that explained his aggression. Amara stood her ground. "Check my status, Lauren, or you'll regret it." Lauren let out a laugh that wasn't laughter. "You're not in our system. Maybe you wandered in from the tarmac. A quiet gasp from a nearby passenger. Amara took her seat. Calm but seething, she dialed her phone. "Kendra," she said. "Start Protocol 9." On the other end. Kendra Miles, her loyal assistant back at Horizon Ventures, replied instantly. "It's ready, ma'am." Evan leaned in. "You okay?" Amara answered without looking at him. "I've seen this before." Richard, arms crossed, muttered loud enough to be heard. "She doesn't belong here," Evan shot back. "You're out of line." Amara didn't flinch. "You're sinking. Richard?" Jaden raised his phone again, ready to film the moment. But Lila snapped. "Stop! Jaden, solve this like a human being." Then came the twist that flipped the cabin. Amara gave Kendra a sharp nod no one could miss. Just then, Richard, eyes glittering with malice, slid a folded slip of paper across the aisle to Amara's foot. She picked it up, unfolded it. 4 words. "Try economy, little lady." She held it for a beat, then passed it silently to Evan. He read it aloud, voice shaking with fury. "Try economy, little lady," gasps from 2 rows back. Even Daniel Harper, the first officer just entering the aisle, looked startled. Amara stood. Her voice was low, but it carried. "You're destroying Horizon Sky Aviation. Lauren." Silence. Passengers looked around, eyes widened. Lila leaned back in her seat, whispering to Zoe, "You're watching something important happen." And then, softly, but clearly, "Faced bias before? Speak up now. Don't film it. Live it. Let your voice carry. And don't ever let silence be more comfortable than truth." Captain Lauren Mitchell didn't need a mic. Her voice alone carried enough venom to fill the cabin. "Daniel, we have an elite-class fraud in Seat 1A, she announced flatly, summoning the first officer as if she were calling for pest control. "She's not in the manifest, and her attitude matches her sneakers." Every head turned. Every eye settled on Amara Brooks, hoodie on, face calm, but every muscle beneath her skin rigid with restraint. First Officer Daniel Harper appeared from the galley, tall, older, graying at the temples, eyes dulled by years of flying but not yet blind to right and wrong. He scanned Amara quickly, then looked away. "Ma'am, do you have verification of elite clearance?" he asked without strength. Lauren didn't wait. "She doesn't. She claims she's with corporate, but I know every exec in this fleet, and I've never seen her face at a board meeting." The silence in the jet thickened as Chloe Reed stepped forward, smirking, and muttered, "She looks more like ground crew on casual day." That cut deep. But not because it was cruel, because it was familiar. And here's where I need to ask you something. If you were sitting on this flight, right now, and heard a black woman being accused of faking her seat, being talked down to, humiliated by a crew she employs without them even knowing it, what would you say? Drop your thoughts below. What would your voice sound like in this cabin? Because what happened next wasn't just about Amara. It was about how silence and complicity fill every empty aisle. Amara's hands rested gently on her thighs. She didn't move, but her voice did. "Captain, this is not the battle you think it is," Lauren scoffed. "I've dealt with people like you before, smooth talkers, fancy words, no credentials." A low murmur came from row 3, where Evan Carter sat leaning forward, jaw tight. "This is harassment," he said quietly, to no one in particular, but loud enough. Chloe whipped around. "Sir, stay out of this. Security will handle it." Amara didn't blink. She reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out her phone. "Kendra," she said into it calmly, "mark this at timestamp 10 and escalate Protocol 9. On the other end, Kendra Miles's voice was steady, unwavering. "Copy that. Escalating now." Lauren froze. Who are you calling? Amara didn't answer, but in her mind. She wasn't in a jet cabin anymore. She was 22 again, sitting in a conference room on Brickell Avenue, freshly graduated, excited, and ready. She had just presented her aviation startup idea, passion glowing through every slide. The executive across from her had looked her dead in the eye and said, "Your numbers are solid, but our clientele isn't ready for your kind of leadership." She'd walked out with tears in her chest and fire in her lungs. That fire had never gone out. Back in the cabin, Chloe walked to the service phone, picking it up with ceremony. "Security, we have an unverified passenger. Cabin 1, please prepare for physical escort." The words physical escort made several passengers stir. In row 4, Jaden Cole once again raised his phone to record. "This is insane," he muttered, but Lila Grant, the diversity consultant, reached across the aisle and put her hand firmly on his wrist. "Jaden, not like this. Speak. Don't just record." He looked torn. "If I don't film this, who'll believe it happened?" Lila said quietly. "They will, because we won't let them forget it." Amara's bag still sat near her feet, until Lauren stepped forward, kicked it aside with the edge of her foot, and sneered. "This isn't a public bus." The laptop inside thudded against the bulkhead. Zoe Ellis flinched in her seat. Amara still didn't move. She looked to Daniel. "Is this how Horizon Sky trains its officers now?" Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked like a man trying not to drown in someone else's mistake. Then came the whisper. Chloe leaned in close to Lauren and said, "She keeps saying Protocol 9. Should we know what that is?" Lauren waved her off. "Probably a bluff." But Amara heard it and smiled, not with her lips, but with her silence. Richard Holt, in row 2, leaned across the aisle, grinning with arrogance. "Still think you're flying with the big leagues?" He slipped a note from his jacket pocket and flicked it toward Amara. It slid across the aisle and landed beside her. She picked it up, unfolded it. 5 words. "Try coach, you entitled fraud." She passed it to Evan, who didn't hesitate. He stood and read it out loud to the entire cabin. "Try coach, you entitled fraud." A woman in the back gasped. A man muttered, "Jesus Christ." Lila closed her eyes. Jaden put his phone down. Lauren walked forward slowly, her posture straight, her voice lower but no less cruel. "You can sit there and bluff all you want, but we'll verify you in 5 minutes, and then you'll be on the tarmac looking up at this jet instead of sitting in it." Amara looked up, finally locking eyes with Lauren. "You're so busy trying to protect your title, you forgot how easy it is to lose it." Lauren scoffed. "From who? You?" And then the twist landed. Quiet, but cutting. Daniel stepped forward, eyes wide now. "Captain, I think she's someone from corporate. I've seen her in the internal bulletins." Lauren turned on him. "You've seen her where?" Daniel hesitated. "I didn't know her name, but I think she's—" "Don't finish that sentence," Lauren snapped. Amara turned slightly and said into her phone, "Kendra, how long until the system pushes the executive registry live to internal flight crew?" 30 seconds. Kendra answered, "Corporate's monitoring the cabin audio now." Amara looked around slowly at the passengers. Some had phones in hand, but none were recording now. They were watching, listening. Lila leaned forward and whispered, "You're making them face themselves," Evan muttered. "You're making them choose a side." "And Zoe?" Zoe finally spoke, voice trembling but honest. "I've never seen someone stay this calm while being treated like nothing," Amara replied softly. "It's not the first time." The tension cracked like lightning as Captain Lauren Mitchell crossed her arms and barked. "Show your bank account, then. Prove to everyone in this cabin that you actually belong here." Every passenger turned, some shocked, some silently nodding, others too stunned to speak. It wasn't just an accusation anymore. It was a full interrogation. And Amara Brooks, still seated in 1A, had just become the courtroom. Her fingers rested quietly on the armrest, but her silence screamed louder than Lauren's demand. "You can't even fake elite status properly," Lauren added, stepping closer, her voice cutting through the polished luxury of the jet like it didn't belong to her. "Go ahead. Let's see your financials. You wanted attention. Now everyone's watching." Daniel Harper, the first officer, stood rigid beside her, his face pale, sweat starting to bead near his collar. Richard Holt laughed in his seat, tapping his gold ring on the wood of the aisle divider like a gavel. "She's stalling," he said. "She's got nothing." Then he raised that same fake executive security badge he'd flashed earlier and added, "This plane has standards. If we let her sit here, what's next?" It wasn't just arrogance anymore. It was performance, performed cruelty. For an audience, Chloe Reed, already emboldened by Lauren's tone, stepped forward with a slight smile and lifted the service phone. "Security, please confirm presence outside the aircraft. We are requesting immediate passenger removal. Unverified status. Non-compliant behavior." The moment she spoke, the door at the rear of the cabin opened. In walked Marcus Tate, head of on-jet security for Horizon Sky Aviation. Tall, built like a boulder in uniform, and always composed, until today. He looked at Amara like she was a security threat, not the CEO who signed his checks. "Ma'am, you'll need to collect your belongings and exit the aircraft immediately," he said. His tone was sharp, final, no questions. "Under whose authority?" Amara asked, not moving. "Captain's orders," Marcus replied. "This isn't optional." He stepped closer, and as he reached for her jacket draped on the seatback, Amara rose, not quickly, not with drama, but like a storm cloud shifting into motion. "Don't touch what doesn't belong to you," she said, voice low, eyes locked on his. Behind her, Evan stood, trembling with anger. "You can't be serious," he said to Marcus. "She hasn't done anything wrong." But Marcus stayed rigid. "She's interfering with flight procedures. That's all I need." From behind him, Jaden once again raised his phone, whispering, "This time, I am recording." But Lila stood, walked down the aisle, and gently placed her hand over the lens again. "Not yet, Jaden," she said softly. "Let the truth speak first." And then, to everyone's surprise, Daniel cracked. He didn't shout. He didn't break down. But his voice betrayed him. Tight, high, uncertain. "Captain, Chloe's the one who made the security call, not you. You hesitated. She didn't." The cabin fell still. Chloe's head snapped toward Daniel. "What are you talking about?" she hissed, but Daniel continued, this time loud enough for all to hear. "She pushed it. I saw her press the override on the manifest report. She deleted a secondary list." Lauren turned to Chloe. "You did what?" Chloe's face went white. "It wasn't confirmed. The name didn't match anyone on the primary elite list. I thought she was bluffing." Amara stepped forward slowly, not threatening, just resolute. "You thought? You based this entire escalation on a thought?" Chloe tried to backpedal. "I mean, it wasn't just me," Lauren said. "Don't drag me into your mistakes," Lauren snapped, suddenly defensive. "You made the call. I said verify her. You went straight to removal." "Because she was clearly lying," Chloe shouted, her composure fracturing. "She had no ID, no badge, no suit, just attitude." Zoe Ellis let out a choked breath, her voice shaking as she said aloud, "That's exactly what they told me last year. on a flight to Chicago. I was told I looked like a +1 instead of a designer. I cried in the bathroom for 2 hours. Evan turned toward Zoe, stunned. You never told us that. Zoe nodded. Because I didn't think anyone would believe me. Now I know I'm not alone. Jaden's camera lowered. For once. The recording wasn't needed. Everyone had seen it now. Everyone had heard. Marcus stepped back. Captain, he muttered. What's going on? But before Lauren could answer, Amara picked up her phone again. Kendra, she said with calm precision. Has the system broadcast been activated? Kendra replied, voice cool and certain. Yes, ma'am. Internal crew registry is now visible on all Horizon Sky-linked dashboards. There was a pause. Then, a beat later, Kendra added, They know who you are now. Across all aircrafts. Daniel blinked. Lauren's face twisted. Chloe whispered, Wait, what? Richard froze, then turned sharply in his seat. What's going on? He barked. Amara turned slowly to the cabin. You want to know who I am? Her voice dropped to a low but clear register, words landing with weight. I am Amara Brooks, founder and CEO of Horizon Ventures. I own Horizon Sky Aviation. Every person on this aircraft works for me, including the ones trying to remove me. There was a beat of utter silence, a full, soul-deep pause where even the engines outside seemed to still. Lauren stared, blinking, as if she'd heard the words but couldn't process them. That's not possible, she whispered. Daniel dropped into a seat like his legs gave out. Chloe took a full step back. Marcus swallowed hard. Jaden muttered, Oh my God. Richard rose, furious, trying to regain control. This doesn't make sense. You can't just be the owner. You lied. Amara's reply was quiet, but absolute. I observed. I tested. You failed. Evan, voice hoarse with awe, simply said, She's the boss. And suddenly, the hierarchy reversed. The passengers leaned forward. The staff leaned back. The energy in the room tilted like a cabin in mid-descent. But Amara wasn't done. This jet, she said, gesturing around them, was supposed to represent a new future in luxury travel, one that welcomed people for who they were, not how they looked. And in 15 minutes, your actions showed me we are nowhere near that goal. Then she turned to Chloe. And you will not take another flight under my company's name. You're done. Chloe's lips trembled. Her knees gave just a little. She whispered, Please. I just wanted to impress them. You impressed no one, Amara replied. Turning to Marcus, Escort her off. She is no longer part of this crew. Marcus nodded slowly. He didn't argue. He didn't resist. He simply stepped behind Chloe and gestured toward the rear door. For the first time since the flight began. Chloe obeyed without a word. Captain Lauren Mitchell stood rigid near the cockpit door, her voice laced with desperation now rather than dominance. Remove her, she ordered sharply, eyes fixed on Marcus Tate, the head of onboard security, who hesitated for the first time since boarding. She's undermining command authority and refusing to comply. Remove her now. Her voice cracked slightly as she added, This is a direct order. Across the aisle, passengers sat frozen in disbelief. Some glanced toward the cockpit, others toward the woman at the center of it all, Amara Brooks, still standing tall in seat 1A, her posture unshaken, her voice silent but resonant in its composure. She didn't flinch when Marcus stepped forward, didn't react when he reached toward her shoulder, not with aggression, but with hesitation, as if somewhere inside. He already knew what this moment would cost him. Ma'am, I need you to come with me, he said, his voice no longer authoritative but uncertain, trying to convince himself as much as her. Amara didn't move. Marcus, she said softly, I sign your paycheck. He blinked. His hand froze inches from her arm. She added, the only person you're escorting off this plane today is a lie. From the cabin's middle row. Evan Carter stood again, voice rising now, sharp with outrage. She owns this jet. Why are you still trying to remove her? Lauren snapped from the front. Because ownership doesn't override flight protocol. She concealed her identity, violated crew compliance. Richard Holt barked from his seat. This is exactly why she doesn't belong here. Rules are for everyone else, right? Jaden stood beside Evan, fists clenched. You mean rules are for people who look like her? That broke something in the air. A brittle silence shattered into murmurs. Then words. Real voices now. Passengers objecting aloud, not just whispering between seats. A woman in business attire raised her voice. She hasn't been violent. She hasn't broken any law. You're throwing her off because she doesn't fit your picture of power, another man added. I've flown Horizon Sky 5 times. If she owns this company, then what the hell are you doing flying it like a private club? Amara slowly sat back down in 1A, never looking away from Marcus. You still want to grab my arm? She asked quietly. Marcus swallowed hard. His hand dropped to his side, but Lauren's voice rang out again, hard, brittle. If you won't do it, I will. And she stormed down the aisle. Just then, Amara's eyes shifted, just slightly, toward seat 3C, where Zoe Ellis, quiet all this time, suddenly stood. Her hands trembled, but her voice was stronger than anyone expected. No, Zoe said, stepping into the aisle between Lauren and Amara. You're not touching her. Lauren stopped. Get out of the way, she hissed. You don't want to escalate this. Zoe shook her head. You already did. I've sat in these seats before and watched women like me get humiliated and no one did a thing. Not today. Her voice cracked, just once, and Amara saw something in her, herself. 20 years ago, alone in rooms filled with smirks and slow nods, always told she had to prove twice as much just to be half believed. Lauren took another step forward, but now Evan, Jaden, and a third passenger blocked the aisle. This ends now, Evan said. You're not in charge anymore. Marcus stepped back as if retreating from the center of a slow explosion. Captain, he said quietly, you've lost the cabin. Amara picked up her phone again. Kendra, she said, corporate update. On the other end. Kendra's voice came sharp and clear. All internal staff databases now show your owner verification. Flight command override granted per protocol. Terminal ops and legal are on standby. Lauren stared, frozen. You activated legal? Amara nodded. I came to see if the rumors were true. Reddit complaints, anonymous reports, internal whispers, and now, thanks to you, I have more than evidence. I have witnesses. Richard stood again, voice rising. This is insane. You can't just come in here and flip a company upside down with a phone call, Amara replied coolly. I didn't flip anything. You exposed it for me. Chloe Reed, already fired and seated near the rear under Marcus's eye, let out a breathless whisper. She knew the whole time. Lauren's hands trembled. You tricked us. No, Amara said. I tested you, and you failed. Lauren turned to Daniel, her last ally in uniform. Say something, she snapped. But Daniel didn't move. He sat, hands folded, looking at the floor, too ashamed to speak. Amara looked across the cabin, making eye contact with every passenger, even the ones still uncertain, still watching. You all saw it. You all heard it. Every word, she nodded at Zoe. And if you ever doubt whether speaking up makes a difference, remember what happened when one voice stood up to power. A beat passed. Then Zoe said softly, I didn't stand alone. A ripple of emotion passed through the cabin. Small gasps, nods, one woman wiping a tear with the cuff of her blazer. Amara returned her gaze to Marcus. You still want to drag me out? Or are we done pretending I don't belong here? Marcus shook his head, voice low with regret. We're done. But Amara wasn't finished. Good, she said, because Horizon Sky's leadership is about to change, and not in silence. She stood again. The cabin had transformed. Not its furniture, not the lighting, but the energy, the hierarchy, the rules. In 15 minutes. Power had shifted not through shouting or fists, but through quiet endurance, exposure, and the undeniable gravity of truth. Amara dialed again. Kendra, inform legal. I've halted takeoff. Tell them Horizon Fair begins today. Already done, Kendra said. Lauren, Chloe, and Richard are under investigation. The board is watching, and they're backing you. Lauren turned, red-faced, and stormed back toward the cockpit. But no one followed. Not Daniel, not Marcus, not the passengers. She walked alone. Jaden exhaled and whispered to Evan. We just watched the cabin flip inside out. Evan nodded, staring ahead. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just stood. Amara didn't sit back down. She stood in the center aisle now, where power had once tried to erase her, and she owned it, fully. The cabin had barely begun to breathe again when Amara Brooks stepped into the aisle like it belonged to her. Because it did. Her hoodie was gone now, replaced with a sharp navy blazer pulled from her carry-on, as if she'd planned this moment down to the thread. The change wasn't dramatic. It was surgical, controlled, deliberate. And the second she zipped that blazer closed, every passenger in the Gulfstream G700 felt the shift, not in fabric, but in authority. Lauren, still rattled near the cockpit, turned as Amara approached. What are you doing? She asked, her voice half command, half confusion. Amara didn't slow. Taking back my cabin, she said. Then she stopped in front of the flight crew, Lauren, Daniel, Marcus, and Chloe, and raised her voice, not to shout, but to cut through every whisper still curling in the air. My name is Amara Brooks. I'm the founder and CEO of Horizon Ventures. I own Horizon Sky Aviation. And this jet, every inch of it, is my property. What you attempted was the public ejection of your employer, based solely on appearance, silence, and assumptions. And now, I'm correcting it. Gasps rippled down the cabin. Jaden muttered. She really is the boss. Evan grinned despite himself. Lila leaned forward, whispering to Zoe. Watch this. Watch every second of this. Lauren shook her head. No, you don't get to walk in, pretend to be a passenger, and then turn this into some kind of corporate ambush. Amara didn't blink. This wasn't an ambush. It was an audit. Chloe, arms folded, tried to recover her posture. You misled the staff. You staged this. Amara turned toward her, eyes colder than steel. You staged this. Chloe, you flagged me as unverified. You called security without confirming my ID. And you smiled while doing it. You're fired. Chloe's mouth fell open. You can't be serious. I am. Amara's voice left no room for negotiation. Turn in your Horizon Sky badge and step off my aircraft immediately. Marcus nodded from behind her, no longer resistant. Chloe looked around, hoping someone, anyone, would intervene, but no one did. Not Daniel, not Lauren, not the passengers. She was alone now, her entitlement stripped bare. Then Amara turned to Richard Holt. You assaulted my belongings, mocked another passenger, and passed me a note telling me to try economy. You're banned, permanently, from Horizon Sky, effective now. Richard jumped up, furious. This is a stunt. A reverse discrimination circus. This is consequences, Amara replied, without raising her voice. And your firm will be hearing from mine. Kendra's voice came through Amara's phone, still on speaker. Already in motion. Ma'am, our legal team has filed incident reports. Richard Holt's hedge fund has 3 pending accounts tied to Horizon Sky partnerships. They're suspended pending review. The blood drained from Richard's face. You can't. But I can, and I just did. The passengers began murmuring again. But this time it wasn't fear or confusion. It was awe. Witnessing someone so ruthlessly disrespected reclaim control without shouting, without threats, just precision. Chloe, still frozen, finally whispered, I wasn't trying to. I didn't know. And then it happened. The twist no one expected. Chloe's mask cracked, her voice trembled. I hid complaints. Amara paused. What did you just say? Chloe's eyes filled. 8 passenger complaints about Lauren. All race-based, all filed in the last 18 months. I logged them, but I didn't escalate them. I didn't want to stir trouble. Daniel turned sharply. You what? I thought if I buried them, things would settle. I thought it would protect the team. Chloe's voice cracked, raw and thin. 2 of those passengers were black women. One said Lauren made her cry before Wheels Up. I just archived it. Amara didn't speak. She just stared. It wasn't anger on her face. It was disappointment. Heavier than rage. Kendra's voice returned. Cool, but edged with heat. Chloe Reed has just admitted suppression of bias complaints on a company-owned aircraft. Protocol 9, Section 4, confirms that as a violation of federal ethical compliance. Lila stood from her seat now. You didn't just hide their voices, she said, her voice shaking. You made them invisible, and you almost did it again. Chloe collapsed into the closest jump seat, her hands shaking, whispering. I didn't think it would get this far. Amara turned toward Marcus. Log that confession, forward it to the Internal Equity Board, and notify HR immediately. On it, Marcus replied. What about Daniel? Evan asked, voice sharp. He knew. Daniel looked up, eyes red. I saw 2 of those reports on the system. I didn't file them myself, but I didn't ask questions either. Lauren stepped forward in one last desperate attempt to salvage control. You're dismantling the crew. You're doing this in front of passengers. This isn't protocol. It's theater. No, Amara said, now standing directly in front of her. What you did was theater. What I'm doing is leadership. The cabin fell quiet again. Amara looked at the passengers, all of them. This wasn't supposed to happen. I shouldn't have to test my own staff just to ensure basic human dignity. But when you ignore whispers for too long, they turn into storms. And today, the storm came home. Zoe stood, her voice still soft but unshakable. You gave us something to believe in. Jaden raised his phone again, not to film this time, but to offer it to Amara. Your call now. She took it gently. Then she turned back toward Lauren. You'll be contacted by legal. This isn't over, but your career with Horizon Sky is... Lauren didn't reply. She didn't argue. She just turned, slowly, and walked down the aisle in silence. A woman who thought she owned the rules, now owned only her silence. Kendra's voice came one final time through the phone. Amara, Horizon Sky Aviation is yours to rebuild, fully. Amara closed her eyes, and for a brief second, she let the silence linger, not as absence, but as reclamation. And then she opened them, steady as ever, and walked back toward her seat, not to rest, but to begin again. The cabin was silent, not out of fear, but from the weight of transformation settling over every passenger and crew member present. Amara Brooks stood in the aisle of her own aircraft, not as a passive observer, not as a silent owner, but as a leader reclaiming the soul of her company. The energy in the jet had shifted entirely. Gone was the oppressive hierarchy that once dictated who deserved respect and who didn't. In its place stood accountability, real and uncompromising. "This jet isn't taking off," Amara said calmly, addressing the passengers. "Not until every one of you understands the direction Horizon Sky Aviation is going from this moment forward." Passengers leaned in, not impatient, not irritated, but riveted. "I'm implementing the Horizon Fare program, effective immediately," she continued. "Every crew member on this aircraft and across our fleet will undergo mandatory verbal audit training, equity simulations, and live culture testing, because no amount of technical excellence can replace the basic requirement to treat people like human beings." A few passengers applauded softly. Jaden nodded with quiet approval. Zoe's expression shifted from tension to cautious hope. Amara continued, pacing slowly down the aisle. "Starting today, no Horizon Sky crew member will be evaluated solely by internal referrals or service surveys. We will audit words, how you speak to people, what tone you choose, who you interrupt, and who you allow to speak." She stopped near seat 3C where Zoe sat, then looked directly at her. "Because every silence allowed this to happen, and every silence can end it," Zoe whispered. "Thank you," her voice catching in her throat. Kendra's voice came through the phone in Amara's hand again, clear and precise. "We've initiated rollout of Horizon Fare. Legal has updated your executive orders. Public statements are pending your green light." Amara nodded slowly. "Hold public release for now. Let the reform begin here, in this cabin, with these people." She turned back toward the cockpit, where Lauren had vanished in retreat. Daniel still sat near the forward wall, expression crumbling under the weight of shame. Marcus stood to the side, hands behind his back, but his eyes were tight, strained. Amara glanced at him. "You stood down when it mattered. That choice saved you, but it didn't erase what led you here." Marcus opened his mouth, then paused, then swallowed hard. "There's something I need to say," he muttered. Amara didn't respond. She waited. He took a breath. "I knew about Chloe's suppression." A full silence snapped into the cabin like a dropped pin. "What?" Evan said from mid-cabin. Rising slowly, Marcus continued, the words painful, reluctant, but real. "She came to me after the third complaint, said if she buried it, it wouldn't become a scandal, that we could handle it internally. I didn't approve it out loud, but I didn't stop her either. I just nodded." Amara stared at him, not enraged, not surprised, just deeply, bone-tired, disappointed. "You let her erase real people, real pain, for convenience, for control," Marcus said quietly. "We thought we were protecting the brand." Amara's jaw tightened. "You weren't protecting the brand. You were protecting comfort. Yours, hers, theirs, not mine, not theirs." She nodded toward Zoe, toward Lila, toward the passengers who had heard it all. "Every time you chose comfort, someone else paid for it in silence." Chloe, seated in the back under security hold, whispered something, barely audible. "What was that?" Lila asked. Chloe raised her head. Her voice shook. "There were 2 complaints last spring. One came from a woman named Charlene Hudson. The other, a man named Levi Gordon. Both filed statements about Lauren humiliating them for asking questions about the elite boarding process. Said she questioned if they actually belonged. I flagged them both. Never filed them upward." Marcus saw the logs. Lila looked stunned. "Those names were on Reddit. We all assumed they were exaggerating." Amara didn't blink. "They weren't. And thanks to this, the world will know they weren't." Kendra's voice returned through the phone. Amara, HR has just flagged internal suppression across 5 past flight teams. 3 involving Lauren, 2 involving Chloe, 1 flagged by Marcus as neutral conflict that was never resolved. The jet had become a courtroom, not of law, but of values. And every confession cracked the walls of the old system. Amara took a deep breath. No one on this aircraft will fly again without facing the Horizon Fair Board. This wasn't bias in isolation. It was culture in hiding, and that ends here. Jaden finally broke his silence. You think people can change? Amara looked at him. I don't hope for change. I enforce it. That's the difference. Lila nodded. And what happens to the rest of them? Amara said clearly. Those who confessed with integrity will face accountability through the Horizon Fair process. Those who tried to cover it up will face legal review. Marcus nodded, voice lower than ever. Understood. Amara continued walking down the aisle, slowly, deliberately. Horizon Sky Aviation is no longer a silent company. We will train differently, hire differently, promote differently, and above all, listen differently. She looked to the passengers. This is your flight now, too. If you see something, say something. And this time, we'll listen. Zoe smiled for the first time since boarding. Jaden set his phone down for good. Evan whispered, This is how change really starts. Amara stopped at the center of the aisle and looked back toward the cockpit, where no one spoke. Then she raised the phone again. Kendra, notify operations. This flight is grounded until every one of these crew members has been reviewed. Send backup crew from Miami base. Reassign the manifest if needed. Done, Kendra said. And Amara, I'm proud of you. Amara nodded once. So am I. The hush in the cabin was no longer tension. It was reverence. The same jet that had once been a stage for humiliation now echoed with clarity, justice, and purpose. Amara Brooks stood tall in the aisle, blazer sharp, voice steady, as she addressed the remaining passengers with finality. This incident doesn't end here, she said, and her tone carried the weight of a verdict. Captain Lauren Mitchell, First Officer Daniel Harper, Flight Attendant Chloe Reed, and Security Officer Marcus Tate will each face formal proceedings under Horizon Sky Aviation's Ethics Review and Federal Aviation Compliance Regulations. Their actions, omissions, and choices on this flight violated not only protocol, but the dignity of our passengers and the mission of our company. A few passengers nodded slowly, others whispering affirmations. Their employment is suspended effective immediately, she added, and FAA ethics investigators have been alerted. Legal departments from both Horizon Ventures and the Department of Transportation will receive full transcripts and voice logs from this cabin. This was not just insubordination, it was systemic bias in action. Evan clapped quietly. Lila followed. Even Richard, silent and pale, looked down, defeated. Kendra's voice returned over speakerphone, quiet and resolute. Richard Holt's firm has been notified. His advisory accounts have been removed from all Horizon Sky partnerships. We've also flagged his corporate conduct for peer review. Amara turned toward the cabin door. This wasn't about status, or wealth, or titles. This was about value, the value of being seen, respected, and heard. And if we allow silence to protect ignorance, we become the very thing we claim to oppose. The passengers listened not like customers, but like citizens who had witnessed history in the making. Then Zoe Ellis stood slowly, voice soft but firm. You didn't just stop a plane, she said. You stopped something that's been flying under the radar for years. Amara's eyes softened as she turned to face the young woman. And you gave it a voice. Zoe. That's what matters, Jaden added. So what happens next? Amara responded without hesitation. We rebuild. Horizon Sky Aviation will undergo a full cultural realignment. Every new hire will pass live dialogue reviews, implicit bias testing, and continuous performance audits, not just on how they perform, but how they behave. The Horizon Fair program will launch across every base, every flight, every crew. She looked to Lila. Passengers like you will be invited to sit on rotating feedback panels. You'll shape this with us, not from the back, but from the front, Kendra chimed in again. And, as of this moment, Horizon Sky's legacy fleet guidelines now include passenger dignity as a key metric for performance evaluation. That was when Daniel finally stood. His face was heavy with guilt. There's something else, he said quietly. Amara turned. Speak. He looked at the passengers, then back at her. 2 years ago, I received a folder with 6 bias-related complaints against Lauren, 2 filed by internal crew members, the rest by passengers. I buried them. I didn't want to believe she was capable of it. I thought if I ignored it, it wouldn't spread. Amara's face didn't change, but her silence deepened. It did, she finally said, and it almost swallowed this company whole. Daniel nodded. I accept the consequences. Fully. Amara looked at Marcus. Escort him to the terminal. No confrontation, just closure. Marcus obeyed silently, and the aisle cleared as Daniel walked out. This time not with command, but with consequence. As the jet grew still again, Amara looked toward the cabin's rear where Zoe now sat upright, calmer, more present. Zoe, she said gently, a flight credit is already in your name. A personal voucher. No expiration. Zoe looked stunned. You don't have to. I do, Amara replied. Because dignity deserves restitution, not charity. Zoe smiled, and the emotion on her face was proof that one act of accountability can stretch far beyond a single seat. Then, as if sensing the emotional crescendo, Kendra's voice returned one final time. Amara, Horizon Sky just posted our new crew-wide message log, title, This is How We Fly Now. Over 30 comments in 5 minutes, from pilots, attendants, even customers, Amara asked. And what are they saying? That you didn't just ground a flight, you lifted an entire standard. Amara exhaled deeply. Then she spoke directly to the passengers and to us. If you've ever been dismissed, profiled, or overlooked, let this story be proof that your silence doesn't make you small, and your voice, when used with purpose, can rewrite the rules. She turned, stepped back into her seat at 1A, and rested her hand on the armrest, not in defeat, but in calm victory. Her final words lingered like scripture. Justice doesn't whisper, it lands. And as the cabin lights dimmed slightly for reboarding procedures, the story did not fade, because justice had taken off. 6 months later, Horizon Sky Aviation would be named the most equitable private air carrier in North America. Internal flight audits were no longer silent checkboxes. They were spoken conversations, recorded, reviewed, and valued. Staff turnover dropped, complaints vanished, and the name Amara Brooks became a symbol of progress in boardrooms far beyond aviation. Passengers who once feared judgment now flew with ease, and those who thought bias had a place in the skies learned, too late, that it could no longer fly. So if you've ever been silenced, minimized, or ignored, remember this flight, this cabin, this woman, and remember, when power ignores justice, courage takes the wheel. Speak up, stand firm, and take your seat.